Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of people who are making the world better around them. They do this locally, globally, and even digitally. We're part of Rotary International, 1.2 million people and 36,000 clubs around the world. Great group of folks, a group of folks you might want to get involved with in some way. There are Rotary clubs near you, probably. And you can learn more about them. You can find them by going to rotary.org. But if you're particularly interested in this online, asynchronous, geographically distributed, wildly cool group of folks that are the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, then just go to rotary.cool. That'll get you there. Our program today is with Mary Gordon in Canada. She's in the Toronto area. She runs an organization called Roots of Empathy. And if you want to see more about what that is in advance of her presentation, read the bio, pause whatever page you are on at the moment, and you can look at the podcast description or the YouTube description or what's on our webpage at rotary.cool and get that and then come back in and hear what she has to say, because I, for one, am quite excited to get this story that we can share as a part of what we do, helping platform the stories of people making a difference. So with that, Mary, I hand it over to you. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley.
Thank you, Rushton. It was 9 o'clock in a grade 4 classroom in Seattle, Washington. The children were gathered around a green blanket, waiting in hushed anticipation for the arrival of the Roots of Empathy family. That would be the mother, the father, and a tiny baby who starts the year at 2 to 3 months old. So the lookout down the hall said, "They're coming, they're coming." The children immediately stood up, almost to attention, and waited for the baby to be presented to them one by one as they sang the welcome song. "Hello, baby Louie, how are you? How are you today?" Then the children were invited to sit down, and they took 3 collective breaths together to help transition out of whatever they were doing in the playground into where they are now in this commune around a green blanket with a tiny teacher. The first thing the Roots of Empathy instructor said was, "How do you think Louis is feeling today?" And many hands went up, but the instructor waited quite a while, which might seem surprising because many children had suggestions. But what the instructor was doing is saying, "There's no rush here. Take your time, think about it. We're waiting for you." So the instructor treated it like a radio show, the seventh caller will get the chance to speak. So when the instructor said, "Could you share what you're thinking?" to one child, it was always the child who had not as much to say in other classes. It was the child who wasn't the star of stage and screen. It was the child who you would not necessarily hear from because they'd been embarrassed or they were academically unsuccessful or whatever the reason. But in Roots of Empathy, there are no right answers. We take a Socratic method. We only ask questions to which we don't know the answer. So children are not praised because we work with the principle of intrinsic motivation. And when you eliminate praise, which can be toxic in a competitive classroom environment, you free up many children to be able to talk. So let me just interrupt myself there and say to Rushton, thank you so much for the invitation. And I think Rotary is amazing in that the whole idea of service is universal for Rotary, and Roots of Empathy cannot exist without the principle of service. Everybody is a volunteer. The parents volunteer for the whole year long to bring their baby in to share the growth of that baby every month over the school year. The instructor is a volunteer who takes a 4-day training, mentoring, and huge commitment and gives 27 classes over the school year. So this is about service, and it's also about learning and giving back. And I guess Roots of Empathy doesn't just come to a classroom, it comes to a community. And it was about 30 years, well, exactly 30 years ago, actually, that I came up with the idea of Roots of Empathy because I had been working with child abuse and domestic violence. And I had realized when thinking one day in the car, oh my golly, the whole thing with all of these very sad and ugly situations is the profound absence of empathy. So, given that disturbing realization, I thought, okay, so where does empathy come from? If we want to break this cycle of violence, we have to allow children to develop empathy. So, because I had worked so much with parents who had new babies, I realized that it was in those early months and years that the attachment relationship and the parent's attunement to that little baby, which supports the secure attachment, is forming. And that is how empathy develops through the loving relationship of a parent or whomever is taking care of the baby. So, how are we going to develop that? So, I decided to take that concept to the classroom. Previously, way back, I was a kindergarten teacher, and I felt that kindergarten was already too late for the children who were being abused. So, what about getting the children, all ages of them up to high school, into a Roots of Empathy program? And I think the whole idea of love grows brains is something that the children very quickly understood. And I guess the idea of empathy is that it's not something that can be taught in traditional ways in my books. It is something that is caught experientially. It involves emotion and cognition. Perspective taking, we're all pretty good at that in society. We're very bad at emotional literacy. In fact, I would say we're an emotionally illiterate world in that we're not tuned into ourselves and to one another. And to have real empathy, you really need to understand your own feelings. So, what happened around that green blanket? When the instructor would say to the children, how do you think the baby is feeling? The children, very often, if they were young, would mirror how they were feeling. If they were a bit older, they'd say how they thought the baby was feeling. And the theory of change here is that the Roots of Empathy instructor would say to the children, when was a time that you felt like that? Or can you remember when that was the way you felt? And again, a long wait and allow children to share. Did anybody have a different experience? So it's question after question after question. And no judgments. You know, empathic listening implies that you listen certainly without assumptions and without judgment. And you can't trick a child. If you're judging, they know. They're better at this than we are as adults. So I think the whole idea of empathy as a cornerstone of really morality, of kindness, of civil society, that without empathy, we don't know how to be good to one another in the world. So I think that the whole idea of empathy being a bridge to bring us together, empathy being the secret sauce, as one child called it, to how we know how to make a friend. And the idea that we decided to measure what we treasure. And people would say, well, it's very difficult to measure empathy. And what our goal was um, to build a more caring, peaceful, and civil society by raising levels of empathy in children and adults. So how do you prove that? So we decided to engage in randomized controlled trials, which is the most sort of intense and expensive kind of research. And we did this on 3 continents. Roots of Empathy is available in 7 languages, and it's the same everywhere we go. It may sound different. The tune of the welcome and the goodbye is the same. The interactions are the same. What is different sometimes is the prevailing culture. But generally speaking, you can recognize where you are, whether it's a more polarized country or a less polarized country. But the idea is that when you are working with children, around principles like intrinsic motivation and intrinsic pride. One child said recently about roots of empathy when we were discussing intrinsic pride, he said, I was most proud when our baby stood up. So here the child is proud of the baby's accomplishment, feeling for the child. So empathy, our concept of empathy, is not taught, it's caught. And the idea is you need to be able to feel with the other. It's not sympathy, it's not compassion. It's the idea that you can actually understand how another person feels and feels with them. So I think this whole idea of mental health, loneliness, all of these things that we're very conversant about now in our society, all of the big issues we're having in the world, the climate challenges. There's no fixing the climate issue unless we care about the person we can't see and the person not born. That requires empathy. Empathy is required for many of the major concerns in the world. So the research that we did on roots of empathy shows that the children become less aggressive, less violent, more empathic, and demonstrate social and emotional competencies. And the interesting thing is, these changes last over time. They don't disappear at the end of the school year. They last over time. So I think the whole idea of masculinity is something that I just want to mention briefly. There's a concern that little boys, and we only work with children up to high school age, are being exposed to sort of a harsh concept of masculinity. So we are working in part of our empathy movement with what I call boys' care. And children appreciate in roots of empathy that whether your packaging is a boy or a girl, it really doesn't matter. It's our shared humanity that matters. And I guess empathy is the ultimate human trait. And little children, they're 100% of our future. And those children sitting in the desks today in your classrooms, they are not only 100% of the future, but they are the citizens, they are the parents, and they're the leaders of tomorrow. So we need to make sure that they have empathy. I think this idea of our shared humanity, I can see it. Thanks, Heather. I got my 1 minute note. This idea of our shared humanity is essential that children understand that they can take care of one another. They can have self-empathy. And I guess the whole concept that the children are the cartographers of the future puts them in a powerful seat. Their agency is amazing. So I just would like to stop here and maybe invite you to cross-examine me if you like.
Well, that is wonderful. I love the story that you tell that it is part of this. And may I say to all of our watchers, our listeners, that on the page where you find this, there is a link to a BBC story that gives you the visual of the story that Mary used to introduce her presentation. And it is wonderful. It is a wonderful opportunity to listen to those children in the classroom learn about what it means to think about the other and to have that empathy. Let's do a quick introduction of the people we have on the recording. So if your camera is on, I'll ask you to wave when we get to you. From our club, I am in, at the moment, San Mateo, California. Also in California is Aggie Freeman. Aggie, good to see you. And rounding out the group from our club for the recording is our representative in Hungary, Budapest specifically, Victoria. Good to see you as well. From the team at Roots of Empathy, we also have Heather and we have Maria. And great to have both of you guys on as well. We'll do the Q&A. As always, you are welcome to put in the chat that you have a question. I'll then ask you to unmute and say it. Or you can write the question in the chat, which is a clue to me to go ahead and ask it as well. So with that, Mary, let me start with asking about the classrooms. So, you talked about how there is an age group that goes up to high school, but what are the requirements of the classroom and the school for
Mm.
working with roots of empathy?
The classroom in a school can be anywhere from kindergarten to grade 8. Now, in the UK, of course, they're in high school in grade 8, so it's a younger age, but there's not really any requirement. We hope that we can go to the highest needs area first, but we are in all levels of socioeconomic schools. Empathy has nothing to do with class or money. It is the luck of the draw. If you landed lucky and you were in a home where parents were able to love you unreservedly and with empathy, you did land lucky, but you can't buy it. And so we're very happy to have an invitation where a classroom teacher who doesn't teach the program, which is rare, it's really rare that you come into a school and into a classroom during instructional time with an external instructor. Mind you, sometimes we train the school social worker or a guidance counselor, but generally speaking, it's a community volunteer who we train, and the requirements are a 4-day training. It's not for the weak of heart. And but it's good fun. As you say, if it isn't fun, it isn't done. And we have a lot of mentoring and professional development. We really honor the gift of volunteering. And so we're in schools in all sorts of situations. We're in Indigenous schools. We're particularly valued by Indigenous societies, whether that's in Canada or in New Zealand. There is an appreciation of almost the sanctity of the infant and the parent.
Wow. All right. And you mentioned that there were 7 languages. Could I ask you guys to list those actually? What are the
Sure.
languages that
Well, there's English and there's French and there's German and there's Spanish and there's Norwegian and there's what other ones have we got now? Yeah,
John?
yeah, Swiss German, which believe it or not is different. And we have some not completely in Welsh. But we are getting to that. And we also have many indigenous languages, which are a hybrid, um, because the indigenous peoples generally so very closely connect their language and their culture. So much of that and many languages. And once we did a video and we had the children singing the welcome and the goodbye song to the baby all together. And when we did that, we had 13 languages that the children sang in. So some of it is hybrid, but yep. Oh, I think did I say Japanese?
You did not, but that's good to
Okay,
hear. For
that
sure.
was the first one.
Okay.
Japanese, Korean, yeah.
Okay. Great.
I think it's more than 7. I think I'm
You're
on a
you've
diet
you've
here.
passed 7 for sure, but all good. There are some really good questions in the chat that I'd like
Okay,
to pass on.
sure.
Aggie asks, if empathy is something we can intentionally cultivate in children, what happens as we grow older, and what can adults do to recover empathy when fear, division, or life experience has caused us to lose some?
Well, I think, Aggie, at Rotary, you are beautifully poised to do this because when we give, we open ourselves to feel. And being able to connect with how another person is feeling and to feel with them, that's the trick. It's not for them, that's sympathy. It's with them. So when you can feel with someone, they can feel that, and it allows you to move towards empathy. And I have seen that happen with adults who say that they have no empathy at all and they couldn't ever. But it is possible to deliver, but not through instruction. We would never be able to have a class in empathy at school. Okay, now we're going to talk about this, that, and the other thing. It is experiential. It is not the word of the day. It is something has to be lived, felt, thought. It's a combination of thinking and feeling.
I think one of the things about experiential learning of any kind is that
Mhm.
it is far less predictable. right? You know, the teacher in lecturing
Hmm.
is engaged in an activity that the
Hmm.
students themselves are used to. But you
Hmm.
bring somebody totally new into the room, a
Hmm.
baby for that matter,
Mm.
and suddenly, you know, how's this going to go? Who is this person? What is this like? I can see a lot of power pedagogically in
Yeah.
approaching this the way you do.
It's interesting, Rushton, because being an old school mom, I have a curriculum for every second, for every class. There's goals, there's outcomes, etc. But we always say the cardinal rule is follow the baby's lead. So the best laid plans, sometimes change, but whatever happens is authentic and deep, and the children remember it and they talk about it when they go home. And it's wonderful to know that the emotional literacy they learn just by talking about how the baby feels and how they feel. And as an educator, you can appreciate, Rushton, that when the children speak in the classroom about how they feel, the lessons are deep because they're listening to their friends, they're listening to their classmates be vulnerable. And as vulnerable as the baby is, the children also are vulnerable.
Yeah,
And they have a sense of their shared humanity. And it makes it a very safe space because we never judge. So children will say things that their classroom teachers cannot believe. So the children do very well. The ones who do best in roots of empathy are the worst actors. So whoever's in trouble all the time is the child who shows up spectacularly, usually, and gives the teacher another chance to see the child in a different venue. And also, we have so many children who are neurodiverse. We're learning more and more. These children thrive. They get invited to birthday parties because everybody realizes that they're just like us, except different. And the baby, of course, they're all different and they learn in their own time. So that's what the children come to think, that um, the learning is unique and that each child is different, just like each baby is different.
excellent. So Victoria asks about technology and social media and this. So is this changing how Roots of Empathy works in some way and seeing how kids themselves may be changing? Are you getting a sense of what schools might do differently in order to help kids better empathize with each other and with the babies they encounter and this kind of thing?
Well, because empathy is not taught, the more empathy that exists in the teachers and in all the people in the schools, the better chance the children have because it rubs off. It's like a yawn. It's contagious. But we use technology, and I'm very grateful for it in all of the work that we are doing around the edges, not in the classroom. We're trying to protect the classroom for authentic interaction between the children and with the baby. So we daren't bring technology into the classroom. There's no tablets on the blankets or anything like that, but we absolutely take full use of technology for charting and counting everything. We have a huge system of evaluation, which is different from the research. We evaluate every single person who touches the program, whether it's the classroom teacher who observes, the instructor who offers the program, the parents who volunteer, or most importantly, the children. Every child has a chance to evaluate. They can do it on a tablet. They can do it, just by writing. We scan it and then we conduct. We have a very sophisticated system of understanding what percentage of children think this and how are we doing with this. And at the end, we produce an annual evaluation for every country. And sometimes people get so specific they want it for their state, or they want it for their province, or they want it in French, or they want to have theirs done in Norwegian, thank you. So it's a really um, powerful moment for technology to keep track of the fact that childhood is changing, but children are not. The circumstances of childhood are changing quickly and dramatically and are deeply influenced by technology, some of which is wonderful and some of which is alarming because it's not sort of being overseen by adults. But children are just as emotionally vulnerable as they ever were. Just because they can speak with sophisticated language around technology does not mean that their emotions are any more sophisticated. They're not. In fact, they're very vulnerable and they have fewer opportunities to connect. And this is what we're doing. We're holding back the gate and hoping that childhood is protected for the children.
So, in that vein, Aggie asks a question about your experience and what gives you hope for the development of leadership. So you had all of this opportunity to see kids
Mhm,
in so many different settings, right?
mhm,
Cultivating empathy.
mhm.
In that these will be the people who will be the leaders of the future. It sounds trite, but is true. What is it that gives you hope that what they are saying and doing, not just in the context of the connection with the baby,
Mhm.
but in what they say about their experiences, allows you to have that hope for the future?
It's what they do, Rushton, rather than what they say. So, Aggie, I have two short stories for you. One school had built a huge, a long slide. And the first day was up and ready for the children to use it at recess. This one little boy in a Roots of Empathy class, he's 6 or 7 years old. He gets up to the top. There's a long ladder. He gets up to the top and has a panic attack. I guess it looks pretty steep from where he is. And everybody in the schoolyard wants to have their turn on recess. It's not very long. So they start shouting at him, "Go on down, you wimp. Go on, you coward." And at the bottom of this long slide, the children are throwing stones up there. So the poor little fellow is terrified. So this other friend in the Roots of Empathy class, you talk about leadership. He goes over to the bottom of the ladder and he says to the first child, "Can you come down? I want to help my friend. Can you come down? I want to help my friend." And all the way up to the top. He got up to the top. By this time, everyone's looking, including the two teachers who are on duty there. And he says to his friend, "I'm going to put my legs and arms around you and we're going to go down together." And they did. And some people clapped and some people cried. It was the teachers who cried because it was such a heroic moment for a little fellow like that. And the other story is also in the schoolyard. Before the children came in from school, there was one little girl who had what the children were calling babyish shoes. And I think they were Velcro, and all the other children had cool shoes, lace up and brand name. I don't know. I didn't see the shoes. Anyhow, they had a little circle around her and they were chanting, "Baby shoes, baby shoes." And the one little girl who saw this, now this was a child who was in care. She has no options. She can't say, "Mommy, I want to have these shoes." So when this little girl was watching and she was upset to see that the children were being so mean, but she didn't know what to do. So they had their classes, and then the bell rang for recess. And she said to this little girl, "May I wear one of your shoes out to recess?" Now that is leadership. That is moral leadership. That is heroic. That's going against the whole crowd. So that is my hero. So when you ask, Aggie, what examples do we have of leadership? I could write a book just on children's courage.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Let's finish with a question about the experience of the kids who are in the classes.
Mhm.
Is there an issue with separation at the end of the year? So they've gotten to know this baby all through the year, and then what? How does that work?
Well, you're so right. I'm amazed that you thought of that because yes, at the last class, the children, we make a little bit of a ceremony. The babies are generally not walking. The last class, they're usually 11 to 12 months old. So the children say to the parent their wish for the baby. And they also put it on a wishing tree, but they say it out loud. And they say what they wish for the baby when the baby is their age. Now, that could be 5 or 6, it could be 12 or 13. It is really heartfelt what they say. One child in the United States who was living in a shelter for children who were abused or were homeless and was attending the local school. And that child said, I wish our baby would always have his own pillow. And that child was really upset about losing the baby because that child had experienced series of losses in their life. It's not unusual that one or two of the children in the class will be tearful, not full out sobbing, but tearful, because I'm not going to get to see my baby walk. They say usually our baby rather than my baby. And we always try to get a family from the community, and we always try to get a family who represents diversity of some kind in the community because that family becomes a rock star overnight. The children see the baby, oh, there's our baby. And they want to know, has the baby flipped over yet? And did the baby get that tooth? And the baby sleeping through the night? All these questions. They have a million questions. They see the family in the grocery store. So the family is used to getting mobbed, but the children many times can continue that relationship. That child generally comes to nursery school, childcare, or kindergarten in the local school. We've been doing this for 30 years. It's over and over and over again. We see that. So yes, the children do have separation, uh, sort of pain afterwards, but some pain is good pain.
Well said.
Hmm.
One painful moment comes when we get to the end of a recording period, and we need to wind things down. The thing that we'll do at this point, before handing it back to our speaker for the final word, is to thank everybody who is watching this video or listening to this podcast. All kinds of ways you can spend your time. Choosing to be in a space where you are seeking out inspirational stories is a great way to choose how you do your media, for sure. And we have hundreds of recordings that we are excited to share with you. If you're curious about any of this, contact us. You can go to rotary.cool and find info there about reaching out to us. And we would love for you to consider learning more about our group, which I'm very proud to be part of. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. Mary, what would you like people to have clearly in mind as they finish this recording?
I guess I would say, and I noticed there's a picture of one of our babies wearing a Seeds of Empathy t-shirt. I didn't mention that we have the younger sibling of Roots of Empathy, which is for elementary school children, is Seeds of Empathy for 3 to 5 year olds in childcare. I would like to say that these children in the classrooms and in the childcare will change the world child by child. So please think about investing in empathy, not necessarily in dollars, but in your time and in your thinking. So thank you very much, Rushton.
Thank you, Mary. And everyone, we will see you next week.